Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Um, in this webinar, I'm kindly assisted by my ex-colleague and friend, Sami. Sami and I used to do quite a bit of webinars together at work. For me, I'm a little bit rusty now. It's been 2 years since I gave my last webinar. So Sami is kind enough to join us, keeping you guys muted. Welcome, Sami, and thanks for joining us. Sami is joining us from Damascus in Syria at the moment.
Yeah, thank you.
During this webinar, we'll keep you guys all muted, keep your video muted, so there's no interference with the presentation part itself of the webinar. Have a look at the Zoom window. Somewhere there's a more button, and in there you can activate the chat box. In the chat box, you can type in questions during the webinar, and we'll go through the questions at the end of the webinar during the Q&A. During the Q&A, of course, you can unmute yourself and ask via audio the question or remarks. But as we go through the webinar itself, it's good that while we give the presentation itself, if something flashes through your mind, either write it down or put it in the chat box, and then we can come back again to the topics in the Q&A session. Let me go and switch windows here. All right. We have 4 basic parts. First, a bit of logistics and the background of the webinar and the group. Then a chapter on boat preparation, and then a chapter about beyond the boat, more on people and procedures and food, etc., etc. And then the big part will be Q&A. The logistics for the webinar, as I said, we try to keep you muted, so there's no interference or background noise from the people who are participating and watching. But then during the Q&A, please do contribute. The worst thing that can happen is that I'm sitting in my ivory tower, preaching to the converted, my eternal wisdom, but that is not the setup. This group, particularly, as you know, this is the 4th year that we do the Finding Dory group. This group particularly looks like a much more experienced group than the groups I've worked in the previous years. In the previous years, these have typically been people who have never done an ocean passage before, and many of those people actually never had done an open water passage before. But then as I went through the WhatsApp group, as you know, we've been running this WhatsApp group now with Finding Dory since, I think since May, almost 2 months now. As people introduced themselves, there were actually quite a few people. I think probably a third, we have to do a poll on this, a third of you have already done an open ocean passage. Many of you have done a west to east. Some of you have already done an east to west passage before. So I want to feed on your experience. And not only that, you're all boat owners. You've been sailing for quite a while. So my input in this webinar is more topics for discussion. And these are also my views and my experiences. But as you know, there is no, in sailing, there is very little black and white. It's always somewhere in the middle. There is a good side for a solution, and there's a bad side. There's a pro side, there's a con side. So in the Q&A, I will definitely count on you contributing and giving other perspectives and sharing your experiences. Now, a step back. Who are we again? We're the Finding Dory group. So for those who joined pretty late in the chat, and we still have people joining every single day, we are an informal group of people who are preparing to do an east to west transatlantic. As I said before, this is the 4th year that we've done this. The first 2 years was before Starlink, so we mainly had interactions in the group when we came close to land. And we mainly used the group to agree where we would meet next. So we met partially in Cartagena, then we met up in Gibraltar, then the group met up in the Canaries, and then the group met up in Mindelo, and then we met up in different places in the Caribbean. Now, since what is it, 2 years since Starlink has linked the satellites over the ocean, lots of cruises now has Starlink. So last year was the first time that we did a Finding Dory group with Starlink active, and most of the people were quite active during the passage itself. They were giving daily weather reports, which was quite interesting because some people were ahead of us, some people were in the back of us. Luckily, we only had one boat which was in trouble and actually needed assistance, but just in case that there would be advice needed, and God forgive that there would be trouble where we need to help. It is an additional safety net, or meant as an additional safety net for people crossing. This year also we started quite early. Normally we start this in October when people start to actually cross, but in collaboration with Helena and Steve from Noforeignland, when this is the first year that we do this together with Noforeignland, we agreed to do it early on so we can do a couple of webinars on specific topics and collect questions that people have and share experiences. Again, a lot of in these webinars, in these groups, just like on the social platforms in Noforeignland, a lot of the experience is with the people who are participating. So here we are, as in our first webinar. We have a number of webinars. The next one is on the 11th of August. And that one is with two ladies on food provisioning and food management and medical provisioning. We have one upcoming on weather routing. So we have a meteorologist slash sailor who will give a webinar on the weather routing, what to expect, what to look for, what applications, what are the limitations of the different weather routing applications, etc., etc. We have a lady joining us in on insurance later on. There will be somewhere September. So an insurance professional who will go over from an insurer experience, what are the do's and the don'ts as a cruiser? What are the tricks, to better prepare based on their statistics of what happened and what insurance was used for, but also the tips and tricks in terms of the different formulas, both for permanent sailing, cruising, and for ocean crossings. Then we'll have also Steve and Helena joining in and give an introduction on the Noforeignland platform. And then I think we have one or two more webinars on selecting crew and tips on procedures during sailing. But today is the first one that we have. Just as a sideline, we also have the Finding Dory group on Noforeignland. We'll use that platform to track the boats as we are crossing, if you want to be tracked. So this is actually a screenshot from this morning. This is where everybody in the group who's registered to the Noforeignland group is at the moment. And I also use that platform for cuts and pastes from the WhatsApp group, things which are more of a permanent value. As you know, when you join in WhatsApp, when you newly join in, you cannot see the previous chats. So a lot of information is lost. So we have, at the moment, we have 3 chat channels on the Noforeignland chat group. One about webinars and the preparation of the webinars, is scheduling. I'll also put the links in there with the recordings. We have one chat channel on the introductions of people, so people don't have to reintroduce themselves again every time a new person joins in. And then we have one on different routings. You know that some of you have been discussing to follow the African route, the African coast, up to the Gambia or Senegal, and then cross. Some of you might be routing straight to the Caribbean. Others will be going via Cabo Verde. Others will go to South America as their final destination after the crossing. So I keep some cuts and paste also of those discussions in the Noforeignland group chat. All right, let's go to the core of the matter. Today, we're discussing the basic checklist. How did I get to this checklist? Well, as you probably know, I sail a lot on boats of others or help other people preparing their boat. This basic crossing checklist is based on my personal checklist that I have. You know, I am now old and gray, and I'm not crazy anymore. So before I step on a boat to help crewing, the boat across the Atlantic, I want to know more or less, you know, how the skipper and the first mate and the boat is set up, what their thoughts are. So since a couple of years, I keep a checklist for myself, things that when I discuss with a skipper, either on preparing his or her boat, or considering that I might join the boat crewing in an ocean passage, I want to know more is what the views are of the skipper on different aspects. And this is basically how this checklist has grown. Now, going to the core of the matter, and this is based on my experience from a number of years of transatlantic sailing and open ocean sailing. The most common mistake, in my view, that people make, people that have never done an open ocean crossing before, is to underestimate what it takes to do an open ocean crossing in preparation, might be boat preparation, crew preparation. People often, when I talk to people that have never done ocean crossing before, they say, well, you know, we sailed in the Med for 2 years, 3 years now. I have 2,000, 3,000 miles now sailed. Most of it is day sailing. You know, sometimes you do a bit of an overnight passage. But basically, you know, open ocean crossing is probably 17, 18 days long. So that's probably 17 or 18 days a day passage. But it's not. In my experience, it's much more taxing on the boat, much more taxing on the crew, and takes a different type of preparation for crew, and also thinking about stuff that in anticipation, what if something goes wrong? So that to me is the most common mistake. Now I have to say, as we were chatting before this webinar with other people, this Finding Dory group is unlike the other Finding Dory groups that we had before. In the past, most of the people that participated were first-time ocean crossers. But I think with the whole list that we have, I think we have 50, 60 boats now in our flotilla. I think about a third of you have done open ocean crossings before. So a lot of the stuff that I might say might be very obvious to you, but then think of those people that have not done an open crossing before. Maybe for them it is a little bit less obvious. But in the meantime, I want to dig into your experiences also, either sailing in the Med or preparing your boat or having done an open crossing before. All right. Chapter 2, the boat. Preparing the boat, of course, is a big part of the crossing. One of my black and white advices are definitely to do a rig inspection, a standing rigging inspection. If the insurance would not ask for it, and many of the insurers do ask for it, then it's just good for your conscience sake. As you can probably imagine, being for 17, 18, 20 days in an open ocean can be and will be very taxing on your boat. You know, and people sail all kinds of boats across the ocean. Some of them are, you know, ex-charter boats that people have bought. Sometimes people have not really sailed their boat very long. Some of them have done already ocean passages on their boat. But even so, always good to do a standing rigging inspection by an expert. And I'll give you two examples how important it is. Last year, I sailed with the boat of a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, colleague. We've been sailing together for 20 years. He bought a boat which just came back from an east-west and west-east passage in the same season. The boat was owned then by a person who was a professional boat maintenance person, so a person who's used to work on boats. So by default, the boat was in pretty good condition. And he just sailed across when the boat was bought in June, a year ago now. The boat was in very good condition. They just arrived back from their west-east passage. And then before the boat was bought, they flew in an inspector from Sweden to go through the whole boat and make a list of things that needed to be done. The boat was normally found in pretty good health. Now we sailed the boat from Vigo up to the UK in September. And in one of the first days, the owner, my friend, the skipper, was sleeping in the saloon. I was on watch, and he stuck his head through the gangway and went like, Peter, it's strange. I could just hear like a nut falling on deck as I was sleeping. It went like, bloop, doop, 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 doop. So, of course, we do deck checks every morning. We go around the boat, see if there's anything that fell off or anything that is damaged on the boat or is shaving, etc., etc. But indeed, we found a nut, and it was a nylon lock nut, and a pretty big one. So a nylon lock nut is typically a nut which is not supposed to fall off, and it was a pretty big one, so it must have come from something bigger, more important. And we actually found that it came from the gooseneck. So the nut of the gooseneck had come off. And here you see a picture of it. It's not a very sharp picture. We had pretty rough seas at the moment. So despite the inspections that that boat has gone through, despite the fact that it had been owned by a person who is a boat maintenance professional, still there was a problem that had always been there on the boat that nobody had seen, nobody had noticed or knew of. What actually had happened is on the gooseneck, the bolt of the gooseneck was a full threaded bolt. So as you know, probably normally the bolts that go through the gooseneck have no thread and only have threads at the end. But this bolt had threaded, was fully threaded. So what happened during the ocean passage, the bolt itself started to fire, and you can see on the screen that the whole of the boat became nut shape. So the whole bolt had more movement, and as such, the nut was able to unscrew itself. And when we saw it, already then the bolt was almost completely out of the gooseneck. And we had pretty heavy weather. We were in the Bay of Biscay. We had pretty heavy weather. We had, I think, 25 knots. We had quite a bit of canvas out. So we almost lost our gooseneck with the mainsail up in the middle of Biscay. That as one example. Now, on the same boat, when we came back from the UK down to the Canaries, at a certain point, we were doing dual watches. And to my watchmate, I said, is it my impression or is this mast flexing? And my watchmate said, but that's strange. It looks like there's play on the side stay. It looks like the side stay is the downwind side doesn't have tension. And we went up on deck, and you could actually see, this is a close-up, you could actually see that the buckle, if you look very well on the picture here, you can see the dark 1 centimeter, the top, shows that the buckle had started to unturn itself. So clearly, the side stay was starting to loosen up. And what had happened was pretty simple. Two things. Somewhere along the way in its previous life, with the previous owner, somebody had clearly tightened up the side stay, but only with the top screw rather than turning the buckle. So this means that the side stay itself, the steel wire, started to become twisted. So there was a twist in the side stay itself, in the steel wiring. And there was a second mistake. As you know, like with plane crashes, very often it is not one problem, it is a combination of problems. So the second problem on the rigging was that the split pin, which goes in the buckle through the bolts, the split pin was bent over too much. So normally the split pin comes out in a 90-degree turn and avoids the buckle to untwist itself. Blocked by the safety pin, the split pin. Now, one of the split pins was bent over 180 degrees, so the split pin itself did not block the buckle from unturning itself. So again, on the same boat, with a professional boat maintenance person as a previous owner, having a full inspection, this problem was not caught. We caught it in time. It was pretty easy to repair. We found the twist. We put tension again on the buckles. We put a new split pin in, and we're up and running. However, these problems typically should be known. Also talking about rigging, and we talk about this in the next webinar, when we talk about procedures on the boat. When I sail across the Atlantic, the morning shift, so the shift after sunrise, one of the duties of the morning shift is to do a tour of the boat, of the deck, and look for anything that has fallen off or has disconnected or starts chafing. Looking at all of the stays, looking at the furler, looking at the sheets, looking at the knots of the sheets, the whisker pole, etc., etc. That, apart from a good rigging inspection before leaving, I think is a very good procedure to put in place, or a rule to put in place, do a deck inspection. Luckily, on most of the boats, there were no pieces to be found, but we did a crossing on a boat which was slightly older, a bigger boat, 72 foot. And I tell you, every morning there were somewhere little bits and pieces that we found, a little nut, a little rod, a little something, a piece of cloth that somewhere, typically the lazy bag, tore off, etc., etc. So, rig inspection. On another thing, sail plan. I might be preaching to the converted here, but as you probably know, as you sail down to the Canaries, a lot of the weather is defined by the North Atlantic lows. So the weather is very variable going down to the Canaries. And those North Atlantic lows, certainly now with the weather changes that we have, these lows start to become bigger and stronger. So they also very often define the weather going from the Canaries down south, typically towards Cape Verde. But then as of you come to somewhere 13 degrees north, 14 degrees north, when you start crossing, most of your sailing will be pretty much downwind, either straight downwind or with the wind coming somewhere from 160, 150 degrees, if you go south enough. If you stay north, then your weather might still be determined by the North Atlantic lows, so you might actually have some upwinds. But typically, the safest route, and we'll come back to that later, is to go down south. My golden route, not golden rule, but my golden route is to go down to Cape Verde. We stay there for a couple of days, reprovision, rest a bit, and then we go down to somewhere 13, 12 degrees north latitude, and then cross. Now, in that, with the wind coming from the back, the waves, of course, will also come from the back, or most of the time come from somewhere 160, 150, 140 degree angle. So your boat is going to move a lot. And that by itself is not only taxing on the rigging and the cook, but also quite taxing on the sail. So in the sail plan, what I'm always looking for is what is the downwind sail configuration, because most of the wind will be downwind, most of the trip will be downwind sailing. Do they have light wind sails, downwind sails? But for me, the Gordon formula is using a whisker pole. And if some of you have a whisker pole and have done downwind sailing with a whisker pole, put it up in the chat box. Give me your input. For me, this is one of the easiest and safest and least labor-intensive solutions for downwind sailing. A whisker pole on the Genoa. Now, why do you need a whisker pole? Why can you sail just with the Genoa only without a whisker pole? Sure you can. And we've done this before. Hey, you can sail across the Atlantic in a bathtub and still make it. There's people who row across the Atlantic. Sure enough, you can sail across the Atlantic without a whisker pole, but I can tell you, having a whisker pole on a Genoa will make your life so much easier. One of the biggest phenomena that we have when downwind sailing on an open ocean is the boat moving. So the sails, the mainsail as well as the Genoa, typically inflate and deflate because the boat is moving left-right. So if you don't have a whisker pole to pull out the Genoa, then your Genoa is going to deflate and reinflate 2 times per minute. And give that for a crossing for 16 or 17 days will be taxing on your furler, on your forestay, on your sail itself, on your sheets. This will not be a happy sail. And of course, the bigger your boat is, the bigger typically the Genoa is. And I can tell you, once we sailed on a 72-foot racing cruiser, which had a massive Genoa, but did not have a whisker pole. And I can tell you the forces that were on the sheet each time that the Genoa deflated and reinflated was enormous. I mean, the lazy sheet, which of course is not under tension, each time as the sail deflated, going back upwind and then being blown up downwind again, that flap reminded me of the clacking of a lash of a whip. It was that strong that one particular moment when I was on watch, the lazy sheet of the Genoa got under the end of an aluminium ladder that we had on the side of the boat. And when the sail, the Genoa, reinflated, the strength of the whip of the lazy sheet on the Genoa was that strong that it broke off like a piece of 20 centimeters of the feet of the aluminium ladder, straight off. I mean, I could not have sewn it straighter. So that is the amount of forces that can be on flapping sheets. Now here is a Happy Skipper. It's one of the boats that I sailed across the Atlantic last winter with a whisker pole. Those of you who haven't sailed with a whisker pole before, very easy system. We use an uphole for the whisker pole, typically the spinnaker halyard. We have a downhole that goes to the front of the boat. And then we run typically that downhole through the cleat. We don't tie it on the cleat, but just through the cleat and down to the cockpit. So in that configuration, it is very easy, single-handedly, during any time, to furl in the Genoa a bit, to put in an extra reef when the wind is coming up or when the wind is dropping, to unfurl it, can be done very easily. So we basically clamp the whisker pole onto a sheet, onto the active sheet. And this is the basic configuration that we can have. If the wind really comes up, you can sheet it in, you can reef it in to the size of a handkerchief. So if you have a squall coming in from the back, you can really furl it in much faster than the time it would take you to take your spinnaker down. And we use this in all kinds of different configurations. So of course we can run wing on wing. Interesting in here is that when the Genoa is pulled out, you can have a negative tack. So we always have the main on the positive tack. So here we're clearly on a starboard tack. But we can go on a starboard tack up to minus 20 degrees. So the Genoa is actually on a minus 20 degrees tack, as long as it's sheeted out. So that makes it a very flexible configuration where you don't have to have a full downwind run, which is difficult when you're in an open ocean because of the swell. Everything will be flapping. So that way you can have a very stable configuration. But you can go a little bit more exotic. Here we're running with the whisker pole on the Genoa and the staysail out. Actually, we sailed past of one of the last transatlantics with the sheet of the staysail running through a pulley at the end of the boom to keep the staysail open. Again, a possible configuration. I think it was 4 years ago, we went a little bit more exotic. So we combined the Genoa with a whisker pole together with an asymmetric spinnaker. Or it can even be more exotic. Something that worked well when the wind was almost straight from aft is to run wing on wing on wing with the Genoa pulled out on a negative tack, the mainsail out downwind, and then the staysail out also. We would have thought that the staysail would be shaded by the mainsail, but apparently there is a spill that comes from the mainsail and goes into your staysail and keeps the staysail up. And that gave us an extra half a knot. So for me, the magic formula is a whisker pole. But of course, you can have downwind sails, code zero, spinnakers. You know, part of the sailing that I do is in the regattas, so I have a love-hate relationship with spinnakers. I hate spinnakers during passage. Almost every single boat that I've sailed on, when we have spinnakers up during passages, everybody is on their toes because we're watching for squalls, we're watching for weather systems. You know, should we dose the spinnaker? Should we not dose it? And as I've told you before, I've guided groups of people sailing across since a number of years now. And every year there's people that waste their spinnaker, tear it up because they became a little bit too complacent, took it down too late, and had to dose it when there was too much wind, or damage was already done, or the spinnaker turned around to the Genoa, etc., etc. So I'm not a real fan of spinnakers, certainly not for an east-west transatlantic, where typically you have enough wind to sail on Genoa, either Genoa only or Genoa and the mainsail. But hey, you know, if you love spinnakers, more than happy. We did, I think, from the 6 east-west transatlantics, I think 3 of them was with spinnakers, and we survived. Although I do have to say, with the spinnakers, there is one golden tip that I can give you. If you see this, this was a halyard, a spinnaker halyard. So if you use spinnakers, do take the habit of every day moving the halyard a little bit. A mistake that people often do is they sail for a number of days with spinnaker, and everything is all unhappy and happy until the spinnaker somewhere at the top of the mast shaved through and cut. So of the 6 east-west transatlantics, twice we lost our spinnaker. So since then, since the second time we lost the spinnaker, due to the halyard shaving through at the top of the mast, the rule is now every single day we move the halyard position a little bit. So as you can see here, nice shave through, and it comes down with a bang. Luckily, we were lucky, so the spinnaker did not wrap around the keel or the rudder or the prop. So we were able to, with quite a bit of people power, host it back on, but it was not a nice sight. Another golden rule is that use preventers for your boom for your mainsail. We typically run with both preventers on. If it is not to avoid crash jibing, which is probably the worst case scenario where we want preventers, it is also to stabilize the boom. Because again, the boat will be moving a lot, so your mainsail will inflate and reinflate quite a bit. So there will be quite a bit of movement on your gooseneck. So do everything you can do to stabilize the boom by putting 2 preventers on. And put the preventers at the back of the boom, not in the middle. If, God forgive, you would have a crash jibe and your preventer is in the middle of the boom, there's a lot of force in the center part of the boom, and potentially you can break your boom. We had a very unfortunate incident of a person that I got to know pretty well, who put the preventer on the hook of the vang. So somewhere even towards the front, he put a lot of tension on it to keep the boom stable. They had an incident, they had a crash jibe, and they broke off the hook of the vang, and they almost broke their boom into 2. So use preventers, always, if not to prevent for crash jibing, just to stabilize the boom. And keep in mind that the stiffer your mainsail is, having battens, or typically a powerful mainsail like cats typically have, the stiffer your mainsail is and the more powerful your mainsail is, the more powerful this deflating and reinflating due to the waves will be. That's why, again, when we sail, but this depends boat by boat, typically we use smaller, a well-reefed mainsail, and we use the Genoa a lot. So we mainly sail on the power of the Genoa. That's also why in my book, having a whisker pole to stabilize that Genoa is so important. But use preventers. Again, chafing, anything in a passage, anything that rubs against anything else, even if it is not with a lot of pressure, will be chafing. I have another piece of evidence here. I don't know if you saw this movie of this guy who was demining in Iraq. I can't remember the name of that movie, where he kept the box with all of the detonation devices from the EODs. Well, I have a box with all leftovers from stuff that happened on the boat to remind me what can happen. So this was a brand new sheet. This sheet was clipped on with a whisker pole. But unfortunately, the claw of the whisker pole itself had somewhere a little bit of an uneven part sticking out, and it damaged a brand new. So you can here see it actually, during the passage, shaved through a half of your sheet. But it doesn't have to be a working sheet or a working line, even just lines hanging over something else. Typically, your lazy sheet. When you run on your Genoa or you run with a spinnaker, your lazy sheet typically hangs over your rail and rubs over your rail, and there's no tension on it. But even so, doing that for 24 hours per day for a passage of 17 or 18 days will damage your sheets. Now, a pretty easy way around this is before we cross, I buy a lot of cheap plastic water pipes that we can cut in pieces. And if, for instance, we see that the lazy sheet is rubbing over the rail, then we slice the water hose in two and clamp it with tie wraps over that piece of the rail where the sheet is rubbing into. You can do the same, if your active sheet or a preventer is rubbing in something else. So in the end, we often end up with a boat with lots of pieces of cheap water pipe to protect things rubbing against each other. But it doesn't even have to be ropes. Anything that moves or flaps for 20 days in a row during your whole passage will wear out, whether it's a Genoa flapping or whether it is your lazy bag, which is flapping continuously. I think on 2 boats in our crossing, we had damage rips in our lazy bag simply because we didn't really pay attention, and it moves a bit. Used to sail during the day, didn't really pay attention, but now we roll up the lazy bags. But twice we had damage on the lazy bags where the zipper kind of untied, or the lazy bag itself became tired and had holes in it, simply because it moves the flaps. I think I have another example. This is on top of a Solaris that we sailed last year. This is a brand new spinnaker pole. Sorry, a brand new spinnaker halyard. And you see the non-friction ring was actually frictioning, chafing through the spinnaker halyard. Luckily, we saw this in time. But this was brand new fitted by the manufacturer, by a professional rigger. So things happen. All right. Another thing to think about, what you're going to do with your dinghy. Bless you if you have a fully inflatable dinghy that you can deflate and store somewhere. As you know, lots of people store it up in the front, if there's space enough. It's always a bit of a mess when you're jibing or you're tacking, because the sheets always get wrapped up around the dinghy. But that's a good way to do it. Bless you if you have davits in the back. Make sure that your davits are strong, and make sure that you stabilize your dinghy so it doesn't get momentum moving left and right, because your boat will move a lot left and right in the waves. Don't put a lot of weight in the boat. Typically, people dare to use the dinghy as the storage, so they put their trash in there and they put the spare stuff in there, etc., etc. It's a nice space, but all of that pulls down on your davits and creates quite a bit of stress on the davits itself. On one boat that we sailed, we actually had to get the dinghy off the davits, because the davits themselves, where they go onto the boat itself, and these were big plates, but it was also a big boat. They were starting to detach, and there was no way that we could find. And it was a pretty big dinghy also. So we had luckily it was a boat with a center cockpit, so we had quite a bit of aft deck storage. So we kind of fabricated with wood a cradle and put the dinghy in there. Also, something to keep in mind is make sure that that your boat is high enough. Last year, one of the boats that we were following had a problem. They had davits, nice sturdy davits, and the dinghy on it, not a very big dinghy, but the dinghy itself and the davits were quite low. So very often, and those of you who have sailed across oceans before, often you get pooped by waves. So the wave comes in from the back, and the wave pulls in the back, comes up against your stern, and typically poops the dinghy. So the boat unfortunately had very low davits. The dinghy was very low above the water, so they got pooped by pretty heavy wave. Sorry, so the whole dinghy pulled up and cracked the whole fixture of the davit base from the stern. So they had a massive hole at the back of the boat, big enough for the bilge pumps not to be able to keep up. Luckily, they were only, I think, 2 days or something from Mindelo, from Cape Verde. So they diverted to Mindelo to get it repaired. But keep it in mind, where to store your dinghy. I think it's getting dark here. Ah, yes, you can still see me. I have light from the computer. Autopilot. God bless you if you plan to hand steer across an ocean 24 hours per day. Totally doable. Again, there's people that cross the ocean on bathtubs. Yeah, sure. But then again, if you don't do a regatta and you want to enjoy your time, you're going to use the autopilot a lot. We almost exclusively sail on autopilot during passages. If you have a single autopilot, have you thought of possible spares? It's not often. I mean, the autopilot will be busy. Will be very busy. And the heavier the seas, the bigger the waves, the heavier the autopilot will work. Have you thought of spares of the critical parts of an autopilot? Have you thought of a wind vane? Last year we crossed with a hydro vane, which helped a lot. Also helped a lot in electricity consumption, because the autopilot will be one of your main electricity consumers. Also gave us a spare rudder with the wind vane, and gave us a spare autopilot, because we had the pure mechanical electrical autopilot on one hand, but we mostly used the wind vane. It's not cheap. It takes a bit of an art and engineering to fix it properly, but boy, was that handy, and did that save us a lot of electricity. Talking about electricity, you know, again, it comes down to the basic misconception for people who have never done an ocean crossing before. They said, well, we sailed the Med for 2-3 years. I have plenty of solar power. I have a wind generator. We never really had to charge our house batteries, and I'm sure that we can do the same on a transatlantic. Unfortunately, with the transatlantic, you sail 24 hours per day, and several systems become more active. You know, you'll have communications, you'll have probably your Starlink up either full time or part of the time. Your autopilot will consume a lot. Your fridges and your freezers will consume quite a bit. And you might also consider, you know, the 220 ampere hour lead acid batteries that you bought 3 years ago might most probably not be enough to keep up with the power requirements that you have on a boat for a transatlantic. Also, you might also consider, you know, those lead acid battery or gel batteries, have they ever been completely decycled? Because as you know, these batteries, if they're cycled too deep, then the full capacity is no longer the documented capacity of 120 ampere hours, if it is gel or a lead acid. Different for lithium batteries, of course. So do consider where is the main power going to be consumed by, and how are you going to manage it? How are you going to charge this? Sure enough, you can charge from your main engine and charge every night to keep up. Some people buy a very small 0.9 or 1 kVA Honda generator, which come very small, self-contained, and charge from there. But I can bet you that typically you will not have enough solar power and wind vane power, wind charging power on a transatlantic to deal with even a minimum power requirement that we had. One of the boats that we sailed last winter, we had the same discussion with the skipper. We had quite a bit of solar on that boat. We had a wind vane also, but of course, sailing downwind, your wind vane, your wind generator is not going to generate a lot of power. And then, because of the angles that we sail, typically a lot of the solar panels will be shaded either by the rigging or by the mainsail, or by other pieces of equipment. So you're not going to be able to charge that much as you would typically sail in the mid, and half the time you're actually at anchor charging the batteries. So do consider how much power you can generate, knowing that you will typically generate less power from solar and a wind generator than when you sail in the mid during a transatlantic passage. But also your power consumption will be higher. And of course, you can take measures of doing power management. Typically, people switch Starlink off or switch the inverters off and only switch them on one time per day for half an hour. Others don't use freezers. You can definitely, we were talking about autopilot, you can definitely tweak your autopilot. So in lighter seas, the autopilot is less aggressive in reaction, reduce the reaction time, reduce the reaction of the autopilot itself, the amount of counter steering that it gives. But even so, I can bet you that a typical cruising boat always needs or will always need an extra source to charge those batteries. The same with freshwater management. Again, last year, we sailed across the Atlantic with 4 people. And in I think it was 15 days that we sailed from Cabo Verde to Barbados, we did not even use the full tank of 250 liters of water. So it is possible, but we were really, really careful in how we used fresh water. I mean, before we warmed water for a cup of tea, we first measured 1 cup, then put it in the boiler, and then boil it. We never washed ourselves with fresh water. We had a water maker, but it was a portable water maker. And portable water makers, making water with portable water makers, so with the input hose floating at the back of the boat, is a real problem. Because first of all, you need to put weights on the input tube to keep the tube underwater. And secondly, the tube itself will cavitate. So it will create bubbles just through the movement or through the water. Even if the tube is kept underwater, it will cavitate, and those bubbles will disturb the pressure and will definitely damage your membranes. So of course, if you have a built-in water maker, you don't have that problem. But do keep in mind what you do in terms of water management. Then we'll probably have a separate webinar on these emergency and safety equipment. What is your man overboard equipment? Do you have a den buoy? Do you have a buoy with a floating line? Do you have PFDs, personal flotation devices? Have they been serviced recently? Do you have PFDs with a built-in man overboard device that automatically sends an IS signal to find the person easier, the person that went overboard? Clip-on lines, safety lines, EPIRB. Is the EPIRB serviced recently? Is it properly registered? Is it re-registered? If you just bought the boat, is it re-registered to you? We also have, for night sailing, I have a very small personal locator beacon. It's like an e-perp that I can have around my neck, very small, that sends a satellite signal to the station, to the shore station I'm registered in. What about fire? Typically, your fire blankets, your fire extinguishers. Do people know? And here we come a little bit in emergency procedures. Do all the crew know where all of these emergency equipment is? Do they know how to use it? Also, in terms of emergency procedures, what are your procedures in terms of, and rules in terms of wearing PFDs? Normally, when we cross from sunset to sunrise, always PFD on, always safety line on. And if it gets, if we have a lot of waves, we clip on, always. And again, we'll work on this when we have a webinar on procedures and rules on a boat. We have additional rules. During night, we only stay in the cockpit. If we need to work on deck, we always have one person in the cockpit and then one or two people that work on deck, but never, if you're on single watches, go on deck by yourself during nighttime. But we'll have a webinar on this. What is your navigation equipment? I've come across a couple of boats where they bought a second-hand boat from a chartering company. And these were boats which were back from the 90s, early 2000s. And the plotter itself was inside by the chart table, which for an ocean crossing is not very useful. You know, have a plotter on deck, and maybe I'm preaching to the converted here and telling you the very obvious stuff. Have IS on your plotter and have radar on your plotter. You will definitely be able to use your radar usefully in spotting the squalls when you go transatlantic east-west. But in terms of communications, your short-term, your VHF stuff, have you recently tested it? You know, Sami who's helping me with the webinar today. Sam and I used to work in communications with the UN. So I'm particularly strict on comms and testing comms, etc., etc. But you have no idea how many people start a transatlantic with a malfunctioning VHF. And if there is somewhere a bad connection on your antenna, or your coax has been damaged, or typically the coax plug on the antenna is not well sealed, so gradually over the years, moisture dripped into it, and there is a capillary suck in the coax itself, so it can suck through and corrode the whole coax. Your VHF will not be performant. If your VHF voice is not performant, most of the IISs that people run from the same antenna. So your IIS is not going to be performant. You're not going to be receiving or sending IIS signals, or you're not going to be able to pick up signals, you know, unless the boat is a mile away from you. A good VHF system, typically 20 miles range. Test it out before you go. Test out your IIS. A good test for IIS. Check how far you can see the boats around you. Typically, a good range is 20-25 miles. Do you have comms in the cockpit? A lot of boats only have the VHF handset and the speaker down in the chart table, down below, and don't hear when other people are calling them. I cannot tell you how many times that we came in close proximity of another boat. They hadn't really seen us, or we thought, or they behaved they hadn't seen us. So we tried to call them on VHF, no response. Why? Because they didn't have VHF comms in the cockpit itself. It was down below. And of course, during night, people are sleeping, so they put the volume down. And then, of course, your longer range communications. My magical formula is, and I'm giving a lot of advice, which is black and white. Again, this is my personal view. My magical formula is a combination of Starlink together with a small device such as an Iridium Go, which, God forgive, if you have to take with you, you can take with you if you need to abandon ship. But also it's a good backup. Sure enough, you can do a whole crossing without any satellite communications, any long range, or using SSB radio. Not much used anymore these days, but my magical formula is Starlink and a small Iridium Go for the duration. Have you thought of insurance? There's a very good chance that your insurance that you use for the Med or sailing in the UK or in North Europe will not be valid transatlantic. Have you looked at different insurance formula to cross? And we'll have a webinar specifically on insurance in early September. There's different formulas. Different insurance companies use different formulas to calculate the risk that they have. One of the risks is, did you get rig inspected recently? How many crew do you have, experienced crew do you have on board, etc., etc. So do consider that most of the insurances that we have that we use to sail in Europe would not be valid sailing transatlantic and might not be valid in the Caribbean either. So have a look. Beyond the boat. So this is stuff which is less hardware oriented, more procedure oriented, or geared towards approaches. So will you cross in a formal flotilla? I think now it's a little bit late to still join the ARC or the ARC Plus. I think the Viking explorers still have open slots. Do you want to join a formal flotilla, or do you want to cross by yourselves? You know, now with our crew, with our Finding Dory, you have more of a virtual flotilla. There's plus and minuses. I've crossed once in the ARC, I've crossed once in the ARC Plus, and once in the Viking explorers, and 3 times across the Atlantic by ourselves. There's plus and minuses of everyone, of every formula. Depends on what you want. Provisioning. We'll have a separate webinar on provisioning. I think this is the 11th of August. So food management. Consider what you have. Do you have a freezer? Do you have a fridge? Do you have storage for fresh produce? Fresh produce, vegetables, fruits, don't like to rub against each other, don't like to be squeezed. Squeezed vegetables and squeezed fruits go off very quickly. So find a way how to store it, you know, in those nets, but don't put a lot of fruits and vegetables in the nets. Make sure that everything can breathe. I'm not going to talk a lot about provisioning right now because we have a whole dedicated webinar on this. But basically, I divided it in 3 categories. You have your fresh produce, you have the stuff which is frozen, and then you have your long-term, more emergency food, which is canned or jarred or dry food. But we'll come back to that later in the next webinar. Again, this checklist is based on my personal experience of sailing. So before I step on the boat, I want to make sure that I agree with the skipper what the overall itinerary will be and what the overall weather routing will be. So are we going to follow the coast of Africa, going down to the Gambia, Senegal, then cross over? What will be more or less the latitude? I will not step on a boat that crosses the Atlantic anything more north than 50 degrees north. The weather is too fragile with the North Atlantic lows crossing over. So agree with your crew, or make sure, at least as a skipper, you make sure that the crew knows and agrees on the overall itinerary. And the weather routing, again, we'll have a separate webinar on this. We'll have also a separate webinar on basic rules and safety procedures. A lot of you will take additional crew on board. Might be friends or family or crew that you hire or crew that you get, hitchhikers you get along. I will come back to that later. Make sure that everybody understands what the skipper's rules are and what the basic safety procedures are. Even the basic rules from, okay, if you take something, after you use it, put it back in its place. So I don't have to look through the whole boat where the bloody flashlight is, or where the bloody safety knife is, or where the bloody water kettle is, because people put it in different places. But also on safety procedures in general. What does a skipper expect from its crew during nighttime, or man overboard procedures? Or what happens if something goes wrong? Do we have the emergency contacts for all of the crew? Do we have basic information? Are they allergic to something? Do they take medication? What is the emergency contact for the crew that you have? You might know this for the people that you normally sail with, your family. You might not know this for the additional crew that you take for the passage. Then, do you need that additional crew? Sure enough, there's a couple of people in our group that will sail across the Atlantic single-handedly. Bless you. Good adventure. Some of you will do this as husband-wife couple. Good on you. Normally, I look for a minimum crew of 4. That allows us, and 4 people, this is when we have experienced crew. That will allow us to do single watches. We'll come back to watches in a little bit later. We have people with experience, so if it becomes hairy, we know that we can trust the crew. Normally, on boats that I sail, we don't take hitchhikers. Well, we took it once. We took hitchhikers who did not have a lot of boat experience. One actually never had been on a boat before, but I will not do this again. It's a blessing, can be a curse. You know, with people that you know, it's already a reasonably more than average stressful situation to do a transatlantic, close quarters. The thing is moving, people are sometimes tired or not feeling 100%. Doing this with people you normally don't sail with, you might not know how they react to this. And then people you have never met before, taking hitchhikers on board might be a little bit of a problem. So it's a bit of a gamble. My advice is always do first a shorter trip. So if you plan to take additional crew for a transatlantic, have those people sail with you from Europe, from Gibraltar down to the Canaries. So if it doesn't work out, you can say, thank you very much, but this is not going to work, bye-bye. If you set off with people you've never sailed before on a 17, 18 days, 20 days transatlantic trip, and it doesn't work out from day number 2, it's going to be a hell of a long trip. And there are many beautiful stories of people who got along as friends and stayed friends forever. There are also quite a few of horror stories of people say never again. And then when they make landfall in the Caribbean, an hour after they make landfall, they're already off the boat and they never speak to the skipper or to the other crew again. Talking about crew and organization and procedures, we can have a whole webinar on watch systems. Depending on the amount of crew that you have, depending on the sailing configuration that you have, the way that the boat is rigged, whether you have single watches, double watches. If it is rough, do you have provisions for dual watches? Do you have fixed times? So everybody has the same time slot in a day, which means, you know, everybody always has the same nice sunset and sunrises, except of course, if you go further west. As times are moving and if your clock doesn't move. Or you have rotating watches so that every day the shifts move so everybody can have the beautiful watches and that those graveyard shifts from midnight until 4 o'clock in the morning, which are also shifts that I like. Do you put in your watch system a motor watch? And some of the boats, I think in all of the boats I've sailed so far, there were only 2 boats where we had a dedicated cook, which was a blessing in disguise. All the others, it was integrated into the watch system. So one person on one particular day would only do the cooking and not do the watch. So basically the time off, but they were cooking. And we rotated. So everybody was doing the cooking from the crew. So we rotated and we built this into the watch system. We can have a whole different webinar on this because there's many, many different variations. Voila. Now I've talked enough. Now it's time to get input from you guys. I'll have to switch on the light here because in the meantime, we had a beautiful sunset right in front of me. And it's time for Q&A. Let me switch on the lights in before, so give me one moment. And then Sammy, I don't know if you had a look of the chat box. I need to go in here if we have already questions. Let me just switch on the light a little bit so I can see what I'm saying.
Sure, Peter, no worries.
Alrighty. Okay, in the meantime, if you have questions that pop up, you can put them in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll have also an open microphone. So you can ask your questions to me. Okay, Sammy?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there were some comments, Peter, about not showing us some photos, although you were talking about some photos, but actually I guess you were showing us some tools from your profile picture. I mean,
Yeah.
videos.
This was probably in a
Exactly.
small window.
Yeah.
My toolbox,
Yeah.
the Hurt Locker. That was the name of the movie, the Hurt
Yeah.
Locker,
Yeah.
where he kept the. You can see it, and you probably have a small window where you can see me. I can probably.
Yeah, exactly. And there are two questions. The first one is about okay. I'm not able to read it actually. Can you check the chat box, Peter?
Yep.
The last one. The last two actually. We are on cat. We actually.
Yeah. We actually. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
We actually hoist the outboard on our stern stanchion. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is from Wanderer. And then for the dinghy, we have bow and stern line as well as a line across the dinghy from starboard to port. I assume this is on the back of the boat. Huh?
Yeah.
So this helps the dinghy not moving. Yeah, indeed. So just I forgot the first name from Wanderer, but don't use just allez, the things to pull up the dinghy. I'm getting tired. Don't just use what you normally pull up the dinghy, but also secure it so that the dinghy cannot move left, right. Totally correct, yes.
Yeah. Hi, Pierre. It's Julie here from Wanderer. That's right. So
Hey,
we've
Julia.
got David here. We're on catamaran, so we got David's that we hoist our dinghy on a daily basis. So we got both bow and stern line on the dinghy that
Yeah.
we secured on our aft cleats accordingly to the starboard and port. But on our west to east Atlantic crossing, the additional things that we did as well is to remove the outboard from the dinghy and
Yeah.
hoist it on a mount, which is stations at the stanchions at the stern.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, we also do additional lines from the starboard to the port so that the dinghy doesn't only move side to side, but it also doesn't move forward and backward. And
Yeah.
it worked really well for us on our west to east transat crossing because the first 2 days was actually quite bouncy. Believe it or not, we actually almost lost our bowsprit. We didn't, almost. But yes, but after that, it was a very smooth sailing. We managed to get it there into Horta in 16 days, but the first 2 days was really, really rough.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, indeed. So indeed, Julia, this is a good additional tip is to make sure you just don't use the davits. That was the word I was looking for. The davit, but also make sure that the dinghy cannot move left, right. So secure it that way and forward and backwards. Yeah. Very good. Thanks. We have another one from Julian. We're thinking of sailing to the Canaries via Atlantic Morocco, but I've heard that it's not permitted to anchor and that marinas are difficult for boats with deep draught to access. I do not know. We can. I'll make a note of it. We can ask around. I have not gone on the Atlantic side of Morocco in marinas. I know a boat that has been there, but maybe if somebody of the group has already been there, I am not sure. It's for sure that it is not a very common on the Atlantic side. It's not very common for people to go into ports there. But I don't know if there's anybody on the group who has sailed and used marinas in the eastern side of Morocco. Sorry, the western side of Morocco. Let me just.
I haven't myself, but I've visited some of the marinas on land, and I've had friends who've been through. I think the general consensus is that it's possible and a bit different, but it's kind of like you say, it's a bit of hard work. You spend a lot of time going through the customs procedures on the way in and out at each port. it's kind of like entering a new country and leaving each time. But I think Rabat is one of the better ones. But I think it is an issue with I think you need a pilot boat to help you get in there, so it's not super straightforward. And people who have tried to anchor have come into all kinds of problems with the authorities turning up and getting hit by fishing boats and that kind of thing. So it can be done, but yeah, it's a bit more difficult. But you do get the benefit of the kind of Moroccan culture and something a bit different if you kind of have more time and patience.
Yeah, indeed. I would also, Julian, have a look at Noforeignland. Typically, there's tips from sailors, and Navili. And normally, I never go to a marina unless if I check them out on Noforeignland or Noonside or Navili. So most of the time, there's quite a bit of input in there. Okay. David is asking on Enrich. David, I've not enrich before. Recently had a discussion on the WhatsApp group in there. I've used, well, apart from Starlink in different configurations, I've used the different Iridium devices and then the Go and the Go Executive, the larger Iridium Go. But I've not used Enrich. There's quite a few people that use Enrich. Recently, I was on a boat with a person who had a little Enrich Mini, and I was quite impressed with the device itself. That one could not be used to download weather information, but it had basic messaging. It did not have voice communications neither. So there's different Enrich devices also. There's the real small one, the one I really like as the final backup device. Then there's a little bit bigger one, which also allows you to send emails and to make phone calls. The coverage is the same. Garmin is using the Iridium constellation, so they basically have the same global coverage. One of the people brought up that Enrich does not need a SIM card, so it's electronically activated. Iridium Go needs a SIM card, and every time you deactivate your subscription, you have to put a new SIM card in there. But I think both of them are.
Peter, I can comment on this if you wish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I have tested actually all types of Enrich devices. So basically, there are two main devices from the Garmin Enrich. The first one, as you mentioned, Mini 2, which has a compact design and robust tracking capabilities and reliable satellite connectivity. As you mentioned, they use Iridium, which is a global coverage actually. And it has an SOS functionality, the Mini 2, and a very good battery life, by the way. So basically, you can tether it to your smartphone, and you can also communicate text messaging from your smartphone or check-in messaging as well. The second one is called Enrich Messenger, which is a very small device actually, and also has the same capabilities like Enrich, perhaps very good performance across various testing parameters. It could be also, tethered to a smartphone, and also has an emergency SOS function. Now, the Enrich it's cheaper than the Messenger. We're talking about 200-300 USD. Of course, there is a need for a service provider to track your location, and there are many global service providers that they provide the service actually, and based on how many points you wish per minute, per 10 minutes, per etc., and so on. Yeah, back to you.
Okay, thanks. David, does that answer your question? You can unmute also. Okay. From Sensor, if there would be a session on places that we can go along the way, Canaries and Cabo Verde, with suggested stuff to do for the passage. It's not in the planning Sensor. We can have a look to do that. we can also see on the WhatsApp group. I mean, it doesn't always have to be me that give the presentation, and some of the following presentations will not be me. I can give some input on some of the navigation stuff for parts of Cabo Verde and the Canaries. But it's a good idea. We can see if there is some common interest of people to allocate a webinar on it. Not something that we have planned right now, but something that we can keep in mind. Let me just make a note of it. So webinar destinations. I think Cape Verde is a lot of people stop over in Mindelo, and Mindelo is a bit of a tricky one because it has a bit of a complicated entry. The wind is tricky, and then there's some issues at the anchorage and some issues in the marina also, which might be interesting to copy purely from a navigation and a cruising point of view. But I can also give some tips on stuff to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. We'll see, Center, if we can do something especially on that. Yeah. Janice is asking, how often do you enter into your logbook as you cross? It depends on the skipper, Janice. We had every boat, every skipper has his own rules for many things. We had passages where we never entered anything in the logbook, and we had passages where every hour on the hour we had to log a line with a number of things. The settings for the autopilot, different speeds, blah 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 blah. So it depends on the skipper. I find it interesting to log. We also keep a fun log, and we make this turn this into a little bit of a competition, because you start to go into watches, so you don't always know what other stuff has happened in other watches, unless when you get together, typically for your evening meal or pre-sunset meal. But we keep a fun log with stuff that we've seen. We have a competition on wildlife that we see. So in the end of the trip, we have a prize for the one who saw the most whales, the most dolphins, the most curious stuff, the amount of flying fish that we collected in the morning from deck, etc., etc. So I don't know if anybody else has any input on using logbooks or frequency to enter in logbooks. Just on mute. Was that a sufficient answer, Janice?
Yes, that was great. I was just curious what others do. We have typically done it every 2 hours, and it's just sort of a way to keep on top of it, and then we do put notes on the side as well about sighting. So just was curious as to what people typically do. Thank you very much.
Yep. You're welcome. If anybody else wants to chip in any of the answers, just unmute and give your input. I see we have 21 people online. Wow. From Peter and Anne, would you be able to recommend somebody who carry out an inspection for us? We do not know anybody in Almerimar in Spain. There is a well-known rigger in Almerimar. I don't know if I can't remember his name. I think he's the only. There is a crane with the workshop and some space to work on the dry. And in that shop, there is a rigger who is pretty well reputed. He is also well reputed to have a bit of a particular sense of humor and to be very strict, but I can't remember his name. Anybody in the group who knows the name of the rigger in Almerimar for Piet and Anne? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Piet and Anne, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, we hope to be in Almerimar at the weekend, and we got a lift out planned on Monday. So yeah, and if we have a look in the yard then by the crane where we're going to be lifted out. We'll see if we can find the rigger then. But we'd certainly like to have our rig looked at before we leave. So, yeah, thanks for the tip.
Yeah. Also have a look on Noforeignland or on Navity. Typically, the people put tips in there also. But I'll try to find out. I know where to get information. I'll try this evening to send out a message. We had on one of the boats that I crossed last year. They had their what was it? They had their whiskey pole and their staysail rigged up over there. And then 4 years ago, we had a staysail also rigged up over there in the same place. But I'll find out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome. Janice SSB. Open to comments from the group. I'm a radio amateur, so I used to be a quite fanatic radio amateur, so I have HF radio in my blood. But it's much to my demise that I have to say that on boats, almost nobody anymore. Certainly not since Starlink. There are still services available. I think I can still send emails via SSB radio. Of course, there's still safety nets with the nets, weather facts, but definitely since Starlink, Janice, hardly anybody anymore. Go ahead, Janice.
Okay, thanks. I was afraid of that because I actually did enjoy it on our cross. I was the radio communications. I'm the one that has the license, and I did enjoy doing it. And I was just curious because we passed in 2012, and so I knew that with technology, probably people have dropped off of it. So, but I was hoping maybe I'll use it as long as I can find other places, and maybe I think there was a marine net that we used to use that was good. So I'll just have to search and search my brain cells to get back into it again. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. You're welcome. There was. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Janice, I see your other question there about Starlink. I think I can probably help with that. Spend a lot of time figuring out how to keep the data down. But I guess it depends a little on what. So what type of, like, are you on iOS or Android for your mobile phone is probably the first question.
iOS.
Okay. And do you take a laptop as well?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Which is Mac and Mac?
We do have a laptop and our boat computer is PC, and mine is PC. My husband's Mac. So we sort of have a combination.
Yeah. So I guess I could probably recommend take the Mac because you can get a little piece of software called, I'm just gonna look it up now. It's called Trip Mode. Like this. Just type it in. And so that will allow you to go application by application and turn their ability to use the internet on and off and see how much they're using.
Okay.
So anything that you can do through, if it's possible to do something through the laptop, then do it through the laptop. As for the phone, when an iOS phone sees Starlink, it just thinks it's normal Wi-Fi and it's a free-for-all and it can use whatever it wants. So some things you can only really get on your phone, and WhatsApp is an example. So what we do then is basically as the skipper, I'm the only one who kind of has my phone connected. So I take the hit on certain things, but I just have it onto Wi-Fi just to get messages periodically and don't leave it on because it'll just burn through data. But you could happily leave your Mac with trip mode on as much as you want because you can see what it's using. So that'll save you a lot of money.
Okay, I wondered about that because I know we do a lot of other land traveling, and I know I did recently do where I went through each of the apps and just turned off the cellular and the Wi-Fi. So that's what I was thinking. That would work with that, but I wasn't sure.
Exactly, that's the issue. Yeah, it would be really wonderful if if Apple allowed that feature for Wi-Fi as well, but they
Yeah.
don't.
No,
The one other thing you can do is turn it on. There's a setting called low data mode,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
if you accidentally left your phone connected for too long, it would stop some of the big downloads. Like it would hopefully stop it from downloading a system update or something like that. But
Oh.
yeah, it's better just to remember to like switch it on for the stuff you absolutely need. Check your WhatsApp, send anything out, and then cut its Wi-Fi again.
Oh, okay,
Is
got
the
it.
best way
Okay.
to go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, no problem.
Yeah, and keep in mind the moment you go, what is it again? 12 miles or 20 miles offshore. You go
12
into
miles,
the
yeah.
12 miles. You go into the priority data, so you pay per gigabyte.
That's it.
Yeah. So the additionally, it all comes down to the rules of the boat,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, well, it's just my
but
husband and I,
yeah,
yeah,
but
and we were just, it's new to us.
yeah.
So we just got it installed while we were in Cartagena, so we haven't actually really gone out with it yet.
Yeah.
And so that's why we were just trying to figure out before we start our long passages.
Yeah.
So
And it's also, Janice, let's say the rules for the crew and what they can do, what they cannot do. Again, Sammy and I worked in communications for many years. So we've done quite a bit of testing on devices, even before Starlink, when we had devices which had far less bandwidth, how to save bandwidth and data. So on everything that you have, switch all of the automatic updates off is one.
right.
Secondly, take the habit, if you don't use data, switch to the Wi-Fi to inactive. Then they can't do anything on your Starlink anyway. And typically, I only use Mac, but the Mac is really rough on Starlink, even when it's dormant. So it checks on updates from email, blah, 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 even it's closed. So I have to be particularly careful that I switch off on my tablet, an iOS tablet, and on my Mac to switch Wi-Fi off. Otherwise, it does all kinds of stuff. We switch all of the background refreshes off on all of the applications. And the general rule on the boat is when we go into a global priority, no videos.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Yeah, no watching of videos, even reels. It's very easy just to go when you're bored and you want to watch a couple of Instagram reels. It consumes data like hell.
Right.
One evening of watching reels and you're at the gigabyte.
Yeah.
So with those basic rules and procedures, typically I can tell you what we've done in three crossings. We've done with 4 crew. We've consumed all the way from Gibraltar all the way to the Caribbean. So that is about 4 weeks, 4.5 weeks. We used about $500 of Starlink consumption.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, because I mean, luckily it's just my husband and I, and we typically when we do even overnight passages, we don't do videos, we don't do any of that. We'll sit and read on our Kindle or something like that. And we make sure we download everything ahead of time. So we're pretty conservative with that kind of thing. So we'll just keep with that. So okay, great. Well, thanks a lot. I was just concerned because I knew, when you've got, tablets and phones and everything going on, and I know there's a lot of background things going on as to, how to try and minimize those things.
Yeah, and your data consumption is one thing. The other thing also to keep in mind is electricity consumption. But the Mini now, you can run it can run off 12 volts, 12 volts or 24 volts. But then the older generation is running onto 20 and needs an inverter. So your inverter is taking power consumption, electricity consumption,
Right.
and your Starlink itself, although it is not a lot.
Right.
I think in total the inverters that we had and the Starlink itself, Sammy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in total it was 100 to 150 watts. But that's quite a bit over 24-hour periods. That's why on some boats we agreed only to switch it on in certain periods of time. And then for the rest we put it on standby or we completely switched it off.
Right. Okay. Very good. Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate both of your input.
No problem. I think I've come to the end of the questions. I don't know if anybody has any additional questions or remarks on my tantrums about whisker poles and my hate for spinnakers, etc., etc. Just unmute and ask your question or put it in the chat box. We still have a couple of minutes.
Peter, there was a comment about we would be interested in a webinar for Capo Verde as trying to decide about heading there. Yeah. And also another comment from Julia and Julian about the logbook that they
we covered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we covered it. Okay, good.
Hey,
Any other?
oh,
Yeah. We have who was first? Wanderer. Go ahead.
Hi. So, with regards to the rigging that you've been talking about, is quite obvious. Obviously, from the monohull perspective, it will be really good to get a bit more perspective from the catamaran type of boat. Just because we're in a catamaran and we have done west to east, but obviously on the east to west transat crossing, you know, by the time we sort of like pass the Canaries, where we're aiming is mostly Guadeloupe, Martinique. We understand that it's probably will be quite downwind. How that impacts the rigging and all that kind of stuff will be really good to get a bit of a perspective from the catamaran side of it, if you have any experience, I suppose.
Yeah. I sailed for the first time a catamaran across the Atlantic 2 years ago. And the main lesson that I've learned there is that in the predictions, we did not only have to look at the wind angle, the wind speed, but also at the waves height, the waves period, because it was a lagoon. And it was, if the waves came from an angle that the lagoon didn't like, it was particularly wild on the boat with a lot of banging on the windward hull, then the horizontal platform underneath, and then the leeward hull with a lot of forces on the boat itself. And it was a lagoon 450 where there had been, you know, through a YouTuber, been quite some questions raised about the sturdiness of the bulkheads, etc., etc. So from my perspective and the experience that I had, keep the wave angle in mind when you look at your routing. And yes, it will be, most of it will be downwind, not that downwind, but typically the wind comes from a northeastern corner. So as you cross from east to west, you will have the wind and anything from 140 degrees to straight downwind. Once you reach somewhere between 14 degrees north and probably 11 or 10 degrees north in that range. But for a cat, unless if you have a real performance cat, which behaves differently, definitely keep the wind angles, the height and the period in mind when you do your routing. That would be my my input. I don't know if anybody else wants to chip in on cats and transatlantic.
Yes, we would like to do.
Yes, go ahead, Vivre.
Yes, for us it will be also, well, by the way, my name is Monica and we are off the catamaran Vivre. For us, it will be the first Atlantic crossing. We are sailing on a cat quite a while. So we would be also very, very much interested in wind and wave angles, which makes it less strainful and a little bit more comfortable on a cat to cross the Atlantic. We do have an Auditech 46, so I just slightly assume that our performance is slightly better than a lagoon. So yes, we are interested.
Okay, very good. I'll integrate it in the webinar that we have on weather routing. I'll ask, as you probably know, we have a meteorologist slash sailor who will give the webinar on the weather routing, and I'll integrate it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. We are looking forward to this. We are very eager to learn and do rather the second-hand experience from someone else, and not to encounter the bad experiences ourselves, if anyhow possible.
Yeah. Very good, Monica. Then another thing that is different from cat to cat is the Genoa. On the lagoon, we had a fairly small Genoa, and the tracks for the car on the Genoa were on the deck very close to the mast. This means that by default, as the boat came out of the factory, it was almost impossible to sail her downwind because you could not open the Genoa. Rather than using a whisker pole, we used a barber hauler. So we would connect a system where the sheet can run through the outside of the boat on the two hulls. So that way we could keep the Genoa open. But the Genoa on the cat that we had, because it was a small Genoa, was of not a lot of use. So we mostly sailed it on parasailer.
Okay.
Which is a beautiful configuration for a cat.
Yes.
That spinnaker I loved.
So for us, we don't have a Genoa. We do just have the self-tacking jib, but we have an asymmetric spinnaker and we have a parasailer. So our intention is, of course, to work as much as possible with the parasailer, which is the lighter version, which we can actually operate from our two winches on the stern.
Yeah. We used a parasailer also on the lagoon, but it was a pretty big one. But I was quite impressed. It's still a spinnaker, so we could not use it, and we sailed pretty conservatively. So we hoisted and dosed it quite a bit because the wind came up and came down. But definitely it was our main powerhouse for sailing across the Atlantic, because our Genoa, and certainly if you have a self-tacking jib, downwind is going to be painful only with that.
Yes. Yeah, so that's why I said we intend to use the parasailer. We are pretty good from 6 knots up to 20 knots with the parasailer, what we experienced now. And I know it's not the Med, but we sailed it 1.5, 2 days straight through the night in the Med with wind gusts up to 20, 22 knots.
Yeah. True wind.
Yes.
True wind, yes.
Yeah, true wind. Yeah. And sailing downwind, 22 knots of true wind is very doable. I think we started thinking about dosing when we were reaching 15 knots apparent. 20 knots was our absolute limit apparent. But by that time we were doing almost 7 knots. But 20 knots apparent was our absolute point where we dosed the parasailer.
Yes. Yeah, we think similar. We'd like to sail a little bit more conservative. We don't have to prove anything. For us, it's safe sailing, and we don't need to rip the equipment.
Oh, every single crossing, when I connect two boats, every single crossing, there is probably a dozen of light wind sails that are from boats that we have in our flotilla that are damaged or torn, or I also in passages. I mean, when I'm regatta sailing, of course you go full on, but in passage sailing, you want to be so conservative.
Yeah, I think we have to be having a separate conversation about the setup of the sail plan, as in what sail clothing we're going to have, and maybe we have to add 1 or 2 things. But thank you so much for the input so far, and I hope it helped some other cat sailors also so far.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'll see if we can do somewhere a session specifically for cats somewhere along the way. Thanks. I had a user who is the name user, and I think he or she unmuted and wanted to say something. And I see you posted something in the chat also. Please go ahead. I have a yeah, go ahead.
Peter, can you hear me?
Hi, it's Mark.
It's Mark. I don't know why I've come up as user. I'm going to have to look into that, aren't I?
Yeah, you and IT systems. So this is the point in the webinar where you come in and say, hey, I've been a skipper of a boat where Peter has sailed on. Forget everything he has said. Welcome, Mark.
Okay, I'll let you say all that, Peter. No, all I was going to say, as I put in the messaging, really, I just bang on about this. The need. There's no need for a mainsail a lot of the time. I demonstrate to my students by sailing with the main and how stressful that can be downwind, and then we take that down, and then we do it all again with a headsail, and we're going just as fast without all the stress.
Yeah, and all the banging and the damage on the cars and the deflating, reinflating, etc., etc.
Yeah, and possible damage on people as well. But anyway, there it is. That's the only point I wanted to make, Peter.
Yeah, very good.
And thank you very much. Very good presentation.
Thanks, Mark.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Let me go through the rest of the chat box. On the recording, I'll post a link to the WhatsApp group, guys, on the recording once we shut it down. All right, I think we're coming towards the end. Last minute questions for the group before we close down. I see none anymore. Thanks for your time. We're almost smash on time, so it was 1 hour and 40 minutes instead of 1 hour and a half. We'll see you all on August the 11th on the webinar on provisioning and food, where we'll have 2 ladies presenting. The outline of the content that we have so far is on the Noforeignland chat in the webinar section. Thanks again. Thank you for all your input. Thanks for joining us today. And on the chat, on the WhatsApp chat, I'll send you the link of the recording. Thank you. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Peter. Bye-bye.
Hey, Sami, thanks again for your help
My
today.
pleasure. So much.
All right.
So much
You're going to learn everything about sailing now.
Count me in.
Yeah. And hey, you know, you can start working in this business also. Huh? As I told you, there were so many Mickey Mouse telecommunications technicians in this business.
Telecom skipper, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, so much interesting. Thank you so much, Peter, and have a great evening.
All righty. Okay,
Bye-bye.
thanks. Okay, greetings to the family. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.